So far, we're only halfway through this decade, and yet, considering that the forecast yesterday didn't really pan out, putting it lightly, this is already a great candidate for bust of the decade. So, what happened? What caused the forecast to go pretty much completely wrong? That's going to be discussed in this video. This is my final update on the series of not so severe storms. So I will say that there was one bright spot with the forecast, and that was on yesterday's video. I did heavily increase the temperatures to showing 80 degrees for the Portland metro area and the mid 70s for the valley. Both of these verified. The high temperature was 82 degrees, which is now the record high for PDX in March. 82 degrees is within the 3-degree margin of error that is industry standard. I've not gotten the reading on downtown Portland's high temperature yet. I do not think it broke or tied the all-time record for them on March 28th, 1930. So that record still stands. That also means we still have a little bit of untapped potential that we haven't utilized yet in March. So now that's out of the way, let's go on to a little bit more of the bad. These were my forecast notes from yesterday. I've not changed a thing in black, minus removing the last bullet point, which was in regards to today. So first off, I was thinking that there was a low chance of tornado or tornadoes, with it being 20% of just seeing one anywhere in the Pacific Northwest, most likely between Everett and Eugene. I don't even hear a report of a funnel cloud. That's about the only part of this that went correct. So, higher chance of hail of severe levels is what I forecasted, with the chance being east of I-5 even higher. There wasn't even any hail at all, let alone severe or hail. Gusty winds up to 65 miles per hour at severe cells. How could you have gusty winds up to that high when there wasn't even any severe cells to note? Highest chances of thunderstorms are at the Cascade foothills. That one was at least accurate once you got north of the Columbia River. Plus, if you were in the Puget Sound area, they did score from this, so this would not be considered a forecast bust for the Puget Sound region, though it did still underperform compared to expectations. And most high resolution models did show at least isolated supercells. I believe the only one that formed was actually over Snoqualmie Pass. Don't quote me on the location. But down here in the Willamette Valley, there was no supercells to speak of, and only low-topped popcorn thunderstorms were struggling to form. And then I do want to take a note of this because, at least in regards to the 5-year history of this YouTube channel in terms of making weather forecasts, I've not had a truly major forecast bust. And I'm specifically defining that when literally anything goes wrong does. That pretty much happened this time, with the exception of the temperatures. So the last time that happened for me was January of 2020, a year before I started this YouTube channel, where I predicted 5 to 10-inch snowstorm 48 hours out and ended up with a trace instead. At least I caught it afterwards. I still count that as a major bust because of how adamant I was about that. And I remember on a Facebook post I did, I think I said there was a 97% chance a week out we'd see an inch or more. Never again will I be that aggressive in terms of chances a week out on a snowstorm. And for anyone wondering, oh, what about February 22nd, 2023? I call this my signature forecast because I did correctly forecast that to be a snowstorm somewhere in the Willamette Valley, most favorable in the western portion of the metro area. That was accurate. I did miss the first convergence zone on the eastern half of the metro area, though my expected totals were more aggressive than I believe every other forecast that was out there. So it was a pretty good forecast, all things considered, especially because you cannot use forecast models during that setup. I will also note that the Pacific Northwest, in my opinion, has some of the most dynamic weather in the US. You can literally experience all four seasons in one day, and there's so many different variables and many different microclimates that just influence each other. This can lead to large busts, however. Generally, I've noticed that this happens about once every 2 or 3 years, either in one way or another. Most notably in 2016, there was 2 major busts that happened actually on back-to-back days. One was a positive bust that pretty much was forecast nothing to happen, and then 10 tornado warnings and the Manzanita EF2 happened. The next day, a major windstorm was expected to happen, and it was a pretty standard windstorm at best. I will say positive about this being a forecast bust is that there was far less damage than the worst case scenario being forecast. And for any new followers or first time viewers of the channel, uh, just be glad the worst stuff is out of the way because it can only get better from here. So for first impressions, I mean, I would have liked to have had a better first impression for all of you, but at the same time, it's good to keep your expectations. It's low that way. It always looks like I'm improving going forward, which is always my goal, which is why I like to do these verification videos at the end of these major events. Lessons learned, and I'll get into this a little bit more as we flip to the same tabs I used yesterday. Any delay in thunderstorms that occur before April or May, depending on the conditions, can lead to a marine push. This is halfly because our biggest heat waves normally end with a marine push. At least that's what happened with this time. And then also for thunderstorms that happen earlier on in the year, especially February, March, and the first half of April, you need that daytime heating to help you with that. As you get into May and beyond, that becomes a little bit less important, especially in the summertime where the daytime heating is actually detrimental for the thunderstorms. In fact, I actually prefer the summertime nocturnal thunderstorms over the springtime thunderstorms we we see here. Chance is a chance. Busts still happen. I will note that a severe thunderstorm watch is issued when at least 6 severe thunderstorm warnings are expected from the Storm Prediction Center. So if one is issued, there's generally a pretty good likelihood that something is going to happen. I believe out of the 7 severe thunderstorm watches that have occurred since 2002, I believe this is the first time that there was no severe thunderstorm warnings. I will also note that while it is still a meme, occasionally severe slash snowy weather does only happen when it isn't forecast, and vice versa. That hasn't really been the case with my channel, as I just previously noted, but it is a meme I feel like I should address. I'm going to switch over to the the pages that I had up yesterday and specifically going over what went wrong. So this is the conditions page specifically for the Hillsborough Airport. And I'm going to scroll back to, let's start it out at about 2 o'clock. So the wind is in this column here that I'm highlighting. And right around the 2 o'clock time frame, you can see that the wind direction flips from a light northerly to a little bit of a stronger west, northwest slash northwest breeze before flipping over to full westerly around 4 o'clock. That's more of a marine push pushing into the area, and that is something that I did not anticipate coming in. The westerlies really ramped up after 4 o'clock, which was before thunderstorms were even expected to roll in, at least the most severe thunderstorms at around 5 o'clock. Now, it did take another 30 minutes for it to roll into the Portland Airport and Vancouver Airport sites, but by that time, there wasn't even any severe thunderstorms yet. So because of that, that ruined things there. Also, the cells that did form were about an hour later than originally modeled as well. So one other thing that this does contribute to, so these are the same soundings that I showed yesterday. This is the North American model from yesterday at about 11 in the evening, or I should say 2 days ago from when this is being uploaded. This sounding is being taken at 4 p.m. And you can see that this is a pretty favorable thunderstorm setup for the Pacific Northwest, especially because the temperature profile keeps cooling down as you go up, and you have a lot of potential energy available with the convective available potential energy being at 1800 units. Now, if I move this forward an hour, you can see that what we call a cap is starting to form, and the convective available potential energy is crashing quickly at the surface, though it is staying pretty good at the mid levels, signifying possibly higher thunderstorms for them, but the severe threat is starting to dwindle after the initial cells roll through. And then this is 6 o'clock, and the cape is pretty much all but gone. And what happens here is that creates what's called a cap in the atmosphere, where it's very similar to an inversion where there's a warm layer right above the surface. So that is very unfavorable for any thunderstorm development. And what ended up happening is because of the westerly winds that came in earlier, that was also present in the middle of the atmosphere, more around this 850 millibar level. So that created a bigger cap earlier as well. Instead of being at the 6 o'clock hour as projected here, it was closer to that 4:30, 5 o'clock hour, which inhibited that severe thunderstorms from even developing in the first place. I'm also going to move on to our satellite imagery here. So this is the GOES satellite from earlier today. I am going to rewind this to right around 2 o'clock Pacific time, and you could see that in the Willamette Valley, with the exception of the Southern Valley, it was pretty clear. That's what we want for thunderstorms to develop. Now, this one will show all the lightning flashes that the satellite picked up. So I'm going to start rolling this through, and the time recorded here is Universal Standard Time, so that is 8 hours ahead. So now we're at about 3 o'clock Universal Standard Time, and there's the first cell that formed over the coast range, but clouds are already moving in, and these are not storm clouds. These are from the system at large and was indicative of the westernly push coming in. I have seen some people say that these clouds inhibited daytime heating. That is not the case because we got the heating we needed. So big cell over the coast range, but as you move forward here, now it's 4 o'clock, cell over the Washington Cascades form. 5 o'clock, there was one cell over McMinnville, and with the exception of another small cell just to the south of Salem, that was pretty much it for the Portland area. And that original cell over the southern Washington Cascades did lift up over the Puget Sound and produce a pretty good light show there. And you could see the higher topped thunderstorms by our standards, especially when the you know, daylight hours go away. And those thunderstorms kept moving north through the Puget Sound. So I'm going to rewind this again to where it is 5 o'clock. There we go. So the highest Thompson clouds were already to the north and the east, and the forecast supercell from the higher resolution models would have been probably right around here, as they did delay it by about an hour. because that westerly push already came in based on the clouds that came in earlier and the observations as recorded in the Hillsborough airport, as I just showed you, that led to this forecast busting. And then taking a look at the Storm Prediction Center's prediction, they did slightly adjust it in the 5 o'clock hour, but did keep the hail threat alive. One thing I will note is that while the tornado chance here shows a 2%, they did increase it to a 5% chance earlier on in the day within a 25-mile radius of any given point. Now, despite this being a bust, that is still very historic because the Portland area has never been under that outlook. So it's kind like in a way, it's kind of disappointing if you're any of the Midwest or Tornado Alley storm chasers that flew out here just to see some of this. And you may not want to fly out here again because of that. There will be another storm, though. Maybe another 15 years, though. And then lastly, I do want to note that this was the severe thunderstorm watch that was issued earlier today and what the Storm Prediction Center thought was possible. So this is the furthest west the severe thunderstorm watch has been issued since 2009. Okay, I will move on to our 7-day forecast and then end it with that. So for the South Willamette Valley, 60s and beyond are gone for the foreseeable future. We're stuck in the 50s. I do still expect a dry day on Saturday. Sunday, mainly dry, though some evening showers I cannot rule out. Then Monday, I am expecting it to be pretty wet now, with off and on sun breaks going into Tuesday, and back to pretty consistent showers on Wednesday, with low temperatures getting to be right around 40 degrees. And for the Portland metro area, similar to the southern Willamette Valley, with the exception of a warmer day on Sunday and on Monday. I am anticipating less rain in the Portland area than I am in the south Willamette Valley, and low temperatures to be a few degrees warmer. So that is it for this video. I am still expecting to release the winter weather verification here in about a week to 10 days. The severe weather did delay the work on that a little bit. I will also release the way too early predictions for next winter. Also, one thing I didn't mention in this earlier in this video is, of course, the time I choose to experiment with thumbnails is the time a forecast busts. Gotta love that. Now I look like a clickbaiter. So now that that's out of the way, I'm glad everyone stayed safe out there. And please continue to stay safe. And until next time, take care. Yes, after the conclusion, thank you for all you for at least attempting to trust me. I'm sorry this didn't go as planned, however, and I do appreciate each and every one of you viewing these videos, especially when I trigger these videos for severe weather.